Welcome to a little behind the scenes action for Return to the Stone Age. This is something that I wanted to try and do around the campfire, but I did not want to waste the resource that I had. So I've shown it before. I have this beautiful Colorado clay that I've sifted and sorted and purified, and I did not want to mess it up by trying to do it around a campfire in the cold and the rain and all of that. Well, here on this beautiful sunny January day, very different from what I'm used to in Alaska, I'm going to try and make some pottery out of this beautiful clay right here. And no, I'm not using beer. I just use this growler to store my water. So let's hope it turns out. As always, I have my wonderful assistants with me. This may be challenging to get good footage of this. I did just recently order a GoPro, which will hopefully increase the production quality of my channel and get some more interesting point of view shots. So I have made pottery in the past. I took a class in high school, which was actually really fun, but I've only ever made one piece of pottery from natural found clay. It was actually the same clay that I'm using here, and I've shown it before in my videos. It's a little cup. It's only about yay big, but when I tell you that thing has stood the test of time, I leave it out at my little caveman site just with my other tools and stuff that I've made. It sat out in the elements all winter and has had no problem at all. So I kind of got it right the first time, and I've been very lucky that it's held up. But I think part of that was due to how long I cured and dried the clay before I fired it. And then I fired it about probably 3 times longer than you're supposed to. But it is extremely durable. Now what I'm doing here is I'm making a little divot in the top of this pile. I'm gonna pour the water in there and then mix it around by hand till I can get a good fine paste. The trick is to not get it too sticky, but you also don't want it too wet, because then it doesn't form properly into the coils or whatever type you're going to make. And I'm not sure how much clay this little jar will actually be able to produce, but I mean, you can already see it's getting, oh, that's beautiful. Very few impurities in this. I sifted out all the big rocks and chunks and stuff like that, ground it up with some of my bone tools, and the final step to get it this fine was to I got a bag, sort of like a loosely knit bag, put the clay in there and then just beat it against the table and then shook it out so that all the fine particles came through. Now, in some of the research that I've done and the videos that I've watched on the subject, say you want about 80% clay to 20% sand or silicates in order to give it a good binding agent, or I'm not entirely certain on the science behind it, but you can see, probably not through the camera until it's done, but you can see in this clay small, very small, but noticeable flakes of some sort of silicate. I showed it to my brother, who's a geologist, and they're too small for him to properly identify, but I mean, he could tell me that they were silicates. So hopefully that sort of sandy, flaky material will do just what it did with my first bit of pottery and bind it together super well. All right. So I've been thinking about this for months. I'm not sure if I want to try to do a pinch pot or a coil pot. What I might do is go inside and grab just a cheap plastic bowl to use as a mold and press it into that to get the shape that I want. Here I've got 2 cheap plastic bowls. I'm just going to use those as a sort of a mold. But in order to get it where I want it, I'm gonna have to press it out. You could do this with a rolling pin, I guess, but it's more fun to use by hand. The danger I'm in is I don't want there to be cracks throughout the clay, so I'm gonna have to try and get it smooth before it goes in, and then just adjust it as it begins to dry. Smooth, add some water, smooth over any cracks that form. So here's the concept: forming it in this bowl because it is kind of thin, just in order to get the proper shape without it collapsing on itself. I'll probably dry it in this bowl as well, just to avoid any complications. So I've got a shape that I like. I think it's doing pretty well. Now I'm letting it dry in the sun. Thankfully not a cloud in the sky. But maybe you can see those shiny, shiny little silicate particles in there. And then when it's done, it almost gives it sort of a gold sheen that really complements the red of the clay. This might be a little difficult to get out of here without messing it up. I'm gonna keep trying. Well, clearly my method didn't work. I'm gonna fix this thing up and try again. Or maybe... Well, here's attempt number 2. Took a while to get it back to what I had before. I'm gonna let this one dry as much as I can while the sun's still up before I try to pop it out of there, because I do not want to go through that again. Well, a couple hours have passed. Probably tell by the angle of the sun. But as this thing has been drying, small little breaks have started to form as the moisture evaporates. So occasionally what I'll do as I'm watching this thing, get some water on my fingertip and then just smooth the crack over and let it fill itself in. And these little girls love it, don't ya? Yeah. After many hours of drying, it was actually dry enough to pop out of the bowl without breaking. It's got a pretty good shape to it, but what I'm doing now, because when I pressed it into the bowl, there were these little cracks and crevices that didn't get fully integrated. Just getting little bits of water and ever so gently smoothing these cracks. So right now, I've let this bowl dry for several days naturally, and what I've done over time, as I've shown, is as small hairline fractures occurred, I would take some water and smooth them over and let it fill itself in using the material of the bowl to fill in its own cracks. Since it stopped cracking after several days of doing that, I've now, just to ensure that it is dry before I start to fire it, I've got it in front of my little space heater on my nightstand. And I've done this several times now, and no further cracks have appeared. I think it's just about ready to start firing it, but I'm just gonna let it dry a little more just in case, because it would break my heart for this to get all the way to this point just to have it shatter whenever I try to fire it. So just to help speed up the drying process a little bit, using this heater. Just want to reiterate that I'm only doing this after it no longer formed any cracks on its own from natural air drying. Also, I'm getting a bath. Hi, Val. Well, now it's time to finally just take the leap and fire it. So what I'm doing is using lump charcoal. Looks pretty cool as well. And it burns very hot. So what I'm doing is I'm going to start this charcoal, have that be the base layer, then place these 3 broken bits of clay piping. I'm not even sure what this used to be. I'm going to place those around to set the bowl on top of, opening side down, and I'm not sure whether or not I just want to build up a fire above it, or if I'm going to use fire bricks to try and insulate it to trap the heat. We'll see as we go. It's getting there. I do need to keep an eye on all these sparks going around though. So I'm going to spread these coals in the bottom of my fire pit, and they are really, really hot. So I'm going to make sure they're all clustered together. I'm going to get my clay pieces here to keep the bowl from making direct contact, and to some degree it'll be a little bit unavoidable. There's going to be some contact. And I've also decided that I'm not going to use the fire bricks to insulate it. Ooh, that's really hot. If there are any blemishes on this, I care a little less about that than I do about getting a proper fire. So I'm going to go ahead, build up a little teepee around it, and then if the coals themselves at the bottom don't light it up, I'll light it up myself. And then I need to keep this going for roughly half an hour. In the past, the one I did, I went overboard and probably went for about an hour, and that thing has been extraordinarily sturdy. So we'll see, maybe I'll just burn up whatever fuel I have on hand, but it's too late to go back now. Now we've got some heat pumping in there. Maybe hard to see between those boards, but it's going strong, and I haven't heard any snaps from the pottery yet. Crossing my fingers. And I have water nearby just in case something happens. Maybe very difficult to see, but right there. Glowing, almost cherry red. Beautiful. Now that's what I call a successful firing. After just scattering some of the coals off of the top, I can see that there are no cracks, no splits, and everything looks to be in order. I am not going to take it off of these coals. I'm gonna just let these coals die down to ashes and let the piece cool down, because this is neither exciting nor is it quick. However, little update here. This little area that I have, my little fire pit, is doing a great job of retaining heat as this thing slowly cools down. If I took it out and let it cool too quickly, it's a little bit chilly today, it's not freezing, but it's cold. But if I took this thing straight from the heat of the fire out into the cold air, there's potential that it could crack even after the firing process is complete. But what's neat, if I hold my hand right over here, there's like a bubble of warmth within this little fire pit that is allowing this thing to slowly cool down. And here it is completed. I am loving this bowl, especially since it's the first thing of this size I've made of natural clay, just dug out of the ground. There is, unfortunately, very hard to see, but right here, a slight hairline crack in one of the corners that only goes down 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. It's not significant, but I will have to keep that in mind if I try to boil water in this over a fire. I don't think that that was from the firing process, because that looks like it was one of the same places that kept doing that during the drying process. So, I mean, you can see I've tried to smooth it over a few times. That was one of the cracks that I was filling in. But regardless, it's very, very minor compared to the rest of it being absolutely perfectly smooth. And the sound this thing makes is just beautiful. So I'm not quite done yet, actually. What I'm going to do now is try and seal this pot with vegetable oil. So what I did was fill this other bowl, same kind that I used to mold it, filled it with vegetable oil, or Crisco, I guess, canola oil, and let it soak in there, let a whole bunch of the air bubbles come out as the oil soaked into the material. And now putting it in the oven to almost season it kind of like you would a cast iron pan. Important part being that I threw it in there as it's preheating. So it's going to slowly rise to temperature with the oven. If I just heated the oven fully, then it would potentially cause problems just throwing that right in there. So we'll see if this works. I'll give it a shot, see how much water it holds, if it's able to, and hopefully that will keep that crack from causing any future problems. One thing of note, after soaking it in vegetable oil and putting it in the oven at 400 for about 30 minutes, the color of the pot has darkened slightly. And it would look more natural in sunlight, but this is what I got right now. But I think it looks pretty good. Well, it is now the next morning after filling the bowl with water, and I honestly cannot tell if it's even dropped any at all. The outside of the same crack is still dry. Basically impossible to see right now. There we go. Still dry on the outside of it. A little water has seeped up on the top of this crack here, but it's not getting through, which is interesting and confusing, but I'm happy for it. So yeah, a very successful piece of pottery. And now it is time for a montage. Well, there you have it. A beautiful, functional piece of pottery made by myself. Had a little fun with some of those action shots there at the end. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll tune into the next video of Return to the Stone Age, in which this will definitely make an appearance.